If you die before you die, you won't die when you die. That's the key. I call it the immortality key.
Brian Muraresku's recent book, The Immortality Key, has been taking the world by storm. But what is it really talking about? What does he mean when he says, if you die before you die? How is someone supposed to be able to die before they die? 15 years ago, I set out on a mission to make sense out of religion, and I was driven by this fear I had about death. When I saw both my grandparents die of cancer, I was deeply troubled. And the thing that really bothered me was the fact that I could understand so much about the universe through science, and yet I had no idea what had happened to my grandparents when they died. So in response, I decided to set for myself a mission to make sense out of religion. Not just one religion, but all religions. Why were they there? What was religion based on? Was one religion right and all the others wrong? If so, who was right and how would I know? These were all big questions that I knew I would have to face, and like any kid born in the Western world, I started my quest in what I felt to be the most likely way. I started reading the Bible. It didn't take long before I found myself caught up in this ancient story. It was like the Lord of the Rings, but better, because people genuinely thought that these stories were true, and so before long I found myself attending church, being baptized, and singing all of those praise and worship songs with my arms in the air. But like many kids in the Western world, I discovered all of the flaws, contradictions, and confusing facts that come along with evangelical Christianity. I asked my pastor to help me understand the conflicts between creationism and science, and he recommended a VHS, yes, there were still VHS tapes back then, by Kent Hovind or Dr. Dino. I digested and chewed through those videos, and I was so convinced that Kent Hovind was right that I confidently bought all the books I could on evolution. I figured I could help Kent Hovind dismantle the lies of evolution. But before long, I realized that someone was lying to me, but it wasn't science. It became clear quite quickly that Kent Hovind was picking and choosing his evidence and manipulating it to suit his narrative. My faith in creationism was gone, and my faith in Christianity collapsed with it. Disillusioned and frustrated, I abandoned my quest to make sense out of religion, and I referred to myself as an atheist. I focused on a new religion, girls. I figured maybe heaven wasn't real, but through dating and romance, I might be able to recreate something of paradise on earth. So I became a pickup artist and spent all of my free time approaching girls and trying to get phone numbers. My character and personality grew darker and darker as my existential crisis drove me into depression. It was around this time that a coworker, a friend of mine, introduced me to a book, The Hero with 1,000 Faces by Joseph Campbell. I read that book and quickly realized that I had abandoned my quest too early. There was a way of making sense out of religion after all. I realized that I'd gotten so wrapped up in Christianity that I'd failed to maybe see the bigger picture. It was through this same Joseph Campbell that I was introduced to the work of the renowned psychologist Carl Gustav Jung, and one night while listening to an old lecture of his, my life was changed.
Because, there are these peculiar faculties of the psyche, that it isn't entirely confined to space and time. You can have dreams or visions of the future. You can see round corners and such things. Only ignorance deny these facts. It's quite evident that they do exist and have existed always.
The confidence of Carl Jung, the way he described precognitive dreams as a self-evident fact, hit me like a freight train. Could the unconscious mind really harbor all of the secrets for making sense out of religion? It was a tantalizing suggestion, and I knew I had to chase it down. So I set up an experiment. I started recording my dreams. I thought, if I have a dream about the future and I write it down, that's my proof that there's something beyond this world, beyond the material. Now keep in mind, I understood that this dream would have to be very specific. It couldn't be in any way vague, like dreaming, that my feet are wet and then looking outside to discover that it's raining. That would not qualify. I would have to have a dream about something very specific in the future with exact details. Now, I kept this up for several weeks, even a few months, and nothing happened. It became clear to me that I might be recording my dreams till hell froze over and never see anything unusual. Carl Jung often talked about the self-archetype, this idea that within each and every one of us there is this nucleus, a kind of star or kernel of light. And this light is the source of life, the source of dreams, and the organizing center of the psyche. It was, in Jung's way of thinking, the closest thing there was to a god. And so I realized that by ignoring this power in the psyche, I might be setting myself up to fail. If I really wanted to observe a dream about the future, I would perhaps need to invoke this intelligence, this power, whatever it was. Of course, this meant I had to pray, and for an atheist that was no easy suggestion. But I put my pride aside and focused on what really mattered, finding the truth. And so every night before bed, I would pray and ask the universe, God, the self-archetype, whatever you want to call it, to reveal to me a precognitive dream, a dream about the future. Then one night it happened. I had a vivid dream about getting a new job. In fact, it was so vivid that I started handing out resumes the next day based on what I had seen in the dream. But none of the jobs ever called me back. Months went by and I wasn't hired. In fact, I was hired by someone completely different, and I said to myself, I was right, it's all nonsense. And so again, I gave up on making sense out of religion. A few weeks went by, a few months, and then one day at work, I was standing in the aisle of the store I worked at, and suddenly this feeling of deja vu came over me. I looked around, looked at the people who were talking, and I realized I've seen this before. But unlike other deja vus, ones where I couldn't place where I'd seen this before, this time I knew exactly where I'd seen this before. It was the dream. I had no doubt every detail, every event matched the dream perfectly. I had observed precognition for myself. Carl Jung was right. And with that, I dropped atheism. Well, maybe not entirely. I felt that there was no way I would ever set foot in a church again. I was deeply resentful towards Christianity and what it had done to me, and so rather than go back to Christianity, I looked for an alternative. And that was when I found Buddhism. I started meditating, reading sacred Buddhist texts, and pretty soon I realized that Buddhists were saying the same things Jesus has said, but sometimes in very different ways. In Diamond Way Buddhism, there are steps that you're supposed to go through, a program called Nundro, 111,111 prostrations, then 111,111 mandala offerings, and so on. The preliminary practices in Buddhism can take decades. I didn't have time for that. So unbeknownst to my teachers, I skipped ahead. I practiced diamond mind meditation and read about the 6 yogas of Naropa. My friends and companions who knew I was doing this cautioned me, saying, you really ought to stick to the program. I pushed into lucid dreaming states and experimented with the nature of reality. I kept expanding my horizons further and further, discovering deeper and deeper mysteries of the unconscious mind. I had dreams where I met with my grandparents, the ones who had died. They seemed concerned and cautioned me about driving my curiosity forward, but nothing could stop me now. I needed to know. I had to know what was at the root of all of this. By now, I was more than frustrated. I was furious. I had suffered so much confusion and doubt over these issues. I would not be satisfied until I had faced off with God himself and asked him once and for all, why are we here? I never asked to be born, and so why was my life so hard? As I pushed deeper and deeper into the caverns of my mind, things in my waking life seemed to get worse and worse. Misfortunes kept mounting. My girlfriend left me. I was arrested for driving without insurance. I found myself living with an escort and drug dealers just to try and make ends meet. I had this growing sense that my driving ambition to make sense out of religion and to see what was at the root of my mind was attracting unwanted spiritual attention, as if I was about to uncover the big secret, the big mystery behind it all, and the gods or whatever were out there trying to see me finish before I could get there. My desperation and paranoia grew. My dreams were haunted by demons and monsters. The shadows seemed to fill up with prying eyes, voices in the dark. I sincerely wondered if I was not, in fact, just losing my mind. A friend of mine suggested one weekend that I should come over for a party. He'd been given a bunch of cheap red wine, and so he was looking for a crowd of people to help him drink it. I joined in, but I wasn't really in the mood for drinking. I had enough on my mind. During the party, some guys that none of us knew showed up and started rudely demanding alcohol. Because my friend, the host of the party, was already too drunk, I took it upon myself to push these guys out. They left and we finished the party. Everyone went home and I laid down on my friend's couch to have a sleep. Then in the middle of the night, I hear bang, bang, bang on the front door. It was the same guys, the same punks I'd thrown out earlier in the night. Before I could get off the couch, they'd broken in through the front door, and all I remember is a baseball bat and then falling back asleep. My next memory was waking up, wet and cold on the couch. I wondered, why am I so wet? Had someone spilt a drink all over me? I opened my eyes to discover that, in fact, I was covered in blood. My friend's girlfriend screamed when she saw me. The guys had broken in, knocked me out with a baseball bat, and stolen a bunch of the stuff in the house. I was rushed to emergency, but all I could think was, this is the doing of the gods. This is the work of those spirits who are trying to stop me. I'd seen them, even wrestled with them in my dreams, and now, here, they were trying to finish me off. There was no escaping it now. I knew I had to face off with the unconscious mind, to find the monsters lurking there and fight them, undo them before they undid me. And so a friend of mine suggested we try LSD. I'd read about psychedelics extensively, and I knew that this might be the way to finally go beyond, truly beyond this life. We took the acid in the same house where I'd been attacked by my home invaders, and it didn't take long before I realized the true gravity of what I had done. The walls were covered in snakes. I could no longer tell if the voices in the songs we were hearing were the lyrics of the songs or voices in my head. The paranoia grew and grew until it started to overwhelm me. I had this horrifying feeling, this intuition, that I was in fact already dead. That I had in fact died already that night with the home invaders, and now I was just wandering pathetically through an illusion, a mere dream of my former life, persisting, if you will, in denial of the fact that I was already dead. At first I dismissed this intuition, but it just kept growing, and when I looked outside, there was a black hole in the western sky swallowing the world. Everything I had ever known was dissolving. It was the apocalypse, the end of time. I tried everything to try and hold on to my sanity, but as the intuitions grew, my reason faded, and before long, I was convinced. I was dead, and this was the afterlife. Without hesitation, I knew what to do. I'd been preparing for this every day of my life, and now was my chance to put it all in place, to put it all in practice. No more bullshit, no more fooling around. If this was the end, I knew I had to face it, full on. I took advice from the Tibetan Book of the Dead and started to focus on overcoming the fearful projections of my own mind. I started by trying to find my way out of the dream. I looked for cracks in the walls, holes in hidden spaces, trying to find some gap I could slip through to escape the dream. I didn't find any. At one point, I decided that if I couldn't find my way out, I would break my way out. So I climbed to the top of the stairs and threw myself to the ground. Bang! I hit the floor like a sack of hammers. My friend Mike, who by now had taken on the form of a demon, laughed and laughed at my futile attempts at escaping the nightmare. It was then, at the bottom of those stairs, that it hit me. Meditation. Meditation is the key. All those Buddhist meditations I had done were training for this. I got up, moved over to the couch, and sat down, looked at the demon who was now seated across from me, and cried out, "I'm going to destroy the whole universe," and I meant it. This was my dream, after all, and if I was the dreamer, then I had the power to end it and wake up. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and launched myself out of my body. I felt this snapping feeling in my solar plexus as the room in front of me folded up like origami. Everything whizzed past me at lightning speed as I was launched into a vast open void, darkness all around me, as far as the eye could see. I'd done it. I'd escaped the dream. There in the void, a figure appeared, all red and made of self-luminous light. It was Amitabha, the Buddha of limitless light. He moved toward me and said, "You are not permitted to be here." I responded, "You will not stop me from reaching nirvana." I wanted out of existence, once and for all. It was then that Amitabha reached behind his back and pulled out a ball of light, a sphere. He held it in his hand and said, "If you try to pass me, you will never see your mother again." He then passed the sphere toward me. It floated serenely in space. I took it and realized that it was in fact my attachment to my mother. This was the spirit world, and here feelings were phenomena. You could hold an emotion in the palm of your hand. I took a long, hard look at that sphere and said, "Whether I lose my mother today or 50 years from now, it makes no difference. She is lost to me." I let the sphere go and threw it behind me. Then, and without any warning, a profound feeling of fearlessness washed over me. I had nothing left to lose, literally. That was it. I had lost my life, my friends, my possessions, family, hell, even my goddamn sanity. There was nothing left to lose. And so for the first time ever, I was truly free. I screamed into the void, "I am Krishna," because I knew in that moment I had become the fearless divine. And with those words, I plunged towards Amitabha, but before I could reach him, everything started burning. I felt like a meteor crashing through the atmosphere. Everything was on fire, but it was not my body that was burning. I had no body. It was my mind. I felt my memories burning, my thoughts were burning, everything was in agonizing heat, and I descended into what seemed like the farthest reaches of the void. There I was alone, only darkness all around me, and the fiery heat. This must be hell, I thought, and I was okay with that, because here I would finally end it. I would finally cease to exist. Descending into the void of non-being, I would cease to exist, and there would be no longer any more suffering. I focused my mind, started to meditate, and felt myself dissolving into space. I was ceasing to exist, and one final thought came through clearly. Finally. My mind slipped into nothing, and just as the final slivers of my consciousness slipped away, all of a sudden something entirely new appeared. A light, a brilliant white light appeared above me. It shone with the brightness of a million suns. No words were spoken, but I recognized it. I recognized that light, and I said, "Jesus, what are you doing here?" It was the feeling I had learned to recognize as the Holy Spirit when I was a Christian. The light took me, lifted me up, and I moved towards it. It was everything I had ever wanted, all the joy, love, and happiness I had always been craving. I didn't simply want to be with the light, I wanted to be the light. And so I merged with it, and what arose I can only describe as a moment beyond time, a space without space, an awareness of awareness itself. I was home. I was with God. I was God, and God was me, and God was everyone. There was only one life, one love, and one source of being, and this was it. But my time had not yet come. The light, and again, without any words, released me back into the darkness, and there, before me, a star appeared. I started falling toward this star, and I realized that I had been here before. I had experienced this before. I remembered I was being born again. I felt my body start condensing out of space like a ghost, linking up with a machine. I could feel all of my senses linking up. Sight, check. Hearing, check. Breathing. I took a massive breath in and opened my eyes. All around me was paradise. I had made it. This was heaven. I looked around and I was in awe of the ability to see. Every sound was so beautiful simply because it could happen. This was paradise. This was what I had been searching for because everything here was so new and fresh and meaningful. I looked over and there was Mike. But it wasn't Mike. It was me and I was him. He still looked like a demon, curiously enough, but I just laughed and laughed because I finally remembered. I didn't learn anything. I couldn't learn anything because I had always known everything all along. I remembered the truth of creation. This was our dream, our game, our paradise. The spirit of this being spoke to me and said, "Do you remember now? Do you remember who you are?" I knew the answer. I was Vishnu. I was God. I was that great divine light of life that had always been and always would be. I was the cosmic dreamer. But then something new appeared. I looked around and realized that I recognized the room I was in. It wasn't paradise, it was Mike's living room. Hang on a second, if this is Mike's living room, then I'm not really dead. And as soon as I thought that, all of my attachments to this life flooded back in like a cloud of unknowing. I felt my mind being washed over by all kinds of different forms of suffering, desire, fear, anger. All of these emotions were rooted in my attachment to this life. It was a part of the game, part of the illusion, and I laughed and laughed because I knew it wasn't really real. It was only another part of the dream, my dream, and I was the dreamer.